Thank you very much, Emma. Well, welcome everyone to the Power in Place event. Between Young Manchester and I Will. Thank you so much for joining us. As you probably already know, this is all about believing in the power and the potential of place-based approach to youth social action. We as Young Manchester believe that the place-based approach is key to ensuring impactful change and support. Is really important in achieving real and impactful change and supporting some of the most marginalized young people to access quality social action opportunities and youth voice opportunities. And so the aim of this event is really to bring together organizations taking part in a place-based approach to reflect off the power of working with this approach. And so we'll have a panel later, but we'll start with introduction and some framing from Young Manchester delivered by Rachel, who's here. Hi, Rachel. There'll be some amazing speakers from different organizations. Dan Burke from Young Harrow, Carly Newman from number 5, and Daisy Mummery, correct me if I said your name wrong, from Sovereign Housing, and we're gonna have a nice, reflection on the amazing work that they do as organizations, but also a roundtable conversations, and I have some exciting questions. So I'm really excited to hear their insights from it. And then there'll be also an opportunity for some Q&A from the audience. So from you, any questions in regards to this place-based approach and anything's not addressed by the panel conversation. But yeah, how does that sound from everyone? Thumbs up. Yeah, good, fantastic. Okay, so let's start with the presentation from Emma. If I missed anything, Emma, please, can you pick up on it?
You're all good. You did everything. Perfect.
Sorry, yeah. Presentation from Rachel.
So just bear with me for one moment while I share my screen. Cool. Get myself into presentation mode. There we go. Okay, so yeah, we're Young Manchester. Really great to have a nice group of people on the call today to talk about place-based social action. We're really passionate about this, so really excited to get into conversations with some of the other organisations as well and seeing how different people are kind of approaching this. So I'm here just to give a really brief presentation about the City of Social Action and how this fits in with a place-based approach. This is our I Will funded project. We've been delivering this project for a couple of years now, and we're hoping that we're able to kind of continue to deliver this for many years more as well. So yeah, Manchester is the City of Social Action. That's our aim. A little bit about Young Manchester. So we exist to create outstanding opportunities for children and young people in Manchester. We're based in the City of Manchester. We work across Manchester. Our partners are in Manchester. But that's not to say that we don't have links to organisations kind of across GEM, across national as well. But the way that we deliver opportunities and the way that we want to work is through this place-based approach. So we really focus on the strengthening and the connecting and champion organisations that work across Manchester, across the city, and support children and young people here. We're a membership organisation, so that means that we work with lots of different organisations across the youth sector and beyond in the city that sign up to become members of our organisation, and we support them accordingly as part of recognising that really important sort of infrastructure function that we can serve to strengthen the place and strengthen the way that we're working together across the place. We're a place-based funder, I've kind of mentioned that already. We're part of the YPF Trust, so one of our colleagues, Dan, is on the call today as well, so you'll be hearing from him in a moment. He's from Harrow, and the YPF Trust is kind of the umbrella organisation that brings together different organisations like Young Manchester that are working in different places under this umbrella of the YPF Trust. So that's kind of, for us, that's a bit of a network of other organisations that are delivering in a place-based way and working in place that we can connect to and share learnings from as well. And then finally, and most importantly, we're youth-led. So we're really about centering the voices of children and young people in the decisions that we're making, working with young people through our grant-making processes, working with young people in our staff team and on our board of trustees as well. So that's Young Manchester. And what about social action then? This is what we're here for. This is what I Will is all about. So through our I Will work, we've supported around or over 15,000 children and young people to take part in incredible opportunities social action opportunities and make a positive impact in their communities. In large part, our approach to that was by embedding youth social action within the universal provision of youth and play in the city. So embedded youth social action, or a requirement for partners to provide opportunities for young people to take part in social action through their universal provision. So this really opened up the sort of routes into social action for young people. So rather than taking a programmatic approach per se, young people that are attending their local youth club or provision were able to access opportunities to do social action in those settings. So youth social action is embedded in all of our grant funding. So as I say, initially we kind of set up to do this commissioning model from Manchester City Council, and that's grown. So every new piece of funding that we administer, we will work to embed youth social action within that. So that's through the grant making, it's through the application process for organisations embedding youth voice within their applications, and it's through the projects that are delivered and funded through our various pots of funding that kind of brings young people, organisations and communities together. So what is the City of Social Action? It is a project that aims to make Manchester the world's first city of social action. Sorry, I was going to pause. I think there's a couple of people that are not muted. Is it possible to mute yourselves? Oh, nice. Fantastic, thank you, admin. Okay, so Manchester is a city of social action. It's our aim to make sure that what Manchester does is shaped by young people. So we're really interested in the young people that are affected by decisions, shaping those decisions, and we're really cognizant of how that is kind of something that's inherent, that place is really important in that as well. So young people's experiences as a young person in Manchester and as a young person in the north of the city, the south of the city, you know, in a different ward, are actually really different, and that needs to inform how decisions are made in the place where they live. And again, that will have a knock-on impact on how opportunities are formed and making sure that they're accessible and relevant to the young people that are accessing those opportunities in that place. We want to see young people shaping how money is spent, and again, the similar sort of thinking that young people have the expertise in their local area and in their lives and should be informing how that money is spent. We want to broaden this so that everybody in the city of Manchester understands the value of young people in Manchester as well, and understands the value of youth social action and young people's ideas. And we want to see Manchester and other funders that fund in Manchester continuing to invest in youth social action and young people's ideas as well. So a little bit more about what we think that a place-based approach means, but again, hopefully some of the discussion we can kind of pick this apart a little bit and see what other people's thoughts are. But for us, it was about that embedding youth social action within the commissioning model. It was about providing social action opportunities to young people across the whole city at the same moment in time as well. So that became part of what the commissioners were talking about. It becomes part of what the youth and play providers are reporting on. It becomes integral to their work, and in many ways was already integral to a lot of youth work that's happening across the city in terms of supporting young people to have a say and youth voice to feed into activities and young people to make a positive impact. So kind of bringing that together under this umbrella of the City of Social Action and working with funded partners at the same time and across the city, and using this language really allowed us to open up that conversation around what youth social action is and what youth social action means in Manchester. We've also funded young people to do youth-led projects of their own on a much smaller scale through small grants through the City of Social Action, and that's been through an entirely youth-led process. So again, this was to build on that, embedding within youth provision, providing further opportunities for young people to lead on their own projects by having access to small pots of funding. We believe it's really important to work in partnership and collaboration. So we have a role in terms of convening partners across the city and the funded partners that we work with to coordinate activity and bring together sort of a cohesiveness around the work that we're doing. And we also believe in working with local decision makers and national funders that are working in Manchester as well. So it's not about being sort of hyper-focused only on the local, it's about what's happening on a national platform and how can we support national funders that want to work in place to shape their funding in a way that's going to have the most benefit to the people in that place. So it's about what are those conversations and how do we open up those conversations. And we're also really keen on sharing learnings and evidencing the impact of how youth social action is working across Manchester, how it's not working, how might this compare to different places. I think it's really valuable to be able to share learnings from different places of things that have worked and haven't worked, but then also what's working, particularly in the city of Manchester, and are there things that we can learn from the kind of networks of partners that we have and the projects that we're delivering in place that support us to be able to gather more learning and insights and evidence on a sort of deeper qualitative level, and having those understandings from having being sort of embedded within that ecosystem that are really valuable to informing our work as well. So finally, and hopefully, so I'm not taking up too much more time. So place-based funding means that we want to deliver fundings and programs. We're always thinking about growing our understanding and working within the existing infrastructure and ecosystem of the place. We're thinking about, if we've got a set blueprint, how does this adapt to the needs of the place that we want to work in? So we should always be thinking about adapting and being sort of responsive to the needs of the place. How do we build relationships with organisations that are operating in place to gather that rich qualitative data that I was talking about and to inform how we're doing our work? How we're co-designing programmes and funding in partnership with organisations that are already working in place to bring them along and bring along that learning. And how we're building strategic long-term partnerships with the whole ecosystem, that's young people, that's communities, organisations, local decision makers. How we're building long-term visions with those groups to ensure that kind of long-term success and that everyone in the place is brought into the journey. So they're the questions that are always in our minds. I think that's everything from me for now. So I shall stop sharing my screen and hand back over to Sam.
Okay, thank you very much, Rachel. We do have a question from Felicity on the chat, and so I'll also encourage anyone who has a question for Rachel quickly, because we haven't allocated any extra time for questions to Rachel, so might as well do it now to ask. So Rachel, the question goes as follows. Where did the idea of the city for a city of social action come from, and what were the enablers for this in Manchester?
Great question. I think for us, it was about building on our first round of firewall funding was kind of around this embedding social action within universal provision. I think the city of social action was how to bring this together under one banner. So I think for us, Manchester as a city has got a really long and rich history of social action and protest, and it was about how do we kind of bring those two things together. So how do we connect the work that we're doing with youth voice and youth social action in the grant making and the funding that we're delivering, and kind of galvanize that into something broader, like more of a campaign and a call to action, I think.
Okay. Thank you very much. I hope that quite answers your question, Felicity. If there are any questions, please feel free to shoot it there, and hopefully we'll be able to address it at the end of the event, hopefully. So now we're going to move on to panel discussion. Apologies for the background noise, it's just a fixed aspect of the space that we're in. So please keep patient with us in regards to that. So I would like to invite on, I guess you can already see them on your screen, Dan again from Young Harrow, Carly from number 5, and Daisy from Sovereign Housing. And if we can move in that order, if you guys would like to introduce yourselves and the work your organization does, and any initial reflection of on the topic of social action in the space or place. So Dan with you, Dan.
Thank you, Samuel. So yes, my name's Dan. I'm the Chief Exec of Young Harrow Foundation, one of the Young People Foundations. We've existed for coming up to 7 years now, which is slightly crazy. But in this topic, what we're passionate about is, about 5 years ago, we really felt like if you're trying to stand in the middle of a lot of people doing a lot of work and asking to try and harness to make social change, you have to have some firm foundations to figure out how you can harness change. And the two things we have seen work better than ever is how you get youth voice to really understand what's going on, and then you help them be part of program design to make significant change. Because when those two work really well together, you can make significant change. So for us as an organization, just quickly check, did you want me to go in a bit more detail now, or is that a bit later? I don't want to take up time.
If you could just give a brief overview of the work you do right now, and if there's opportunity and avenue to speak about it in more detail in regards to one of the questions that's asked, then I think that'll be very appropriate.
Okay, no problem. So we run a 2-year needs analysis that last year had over 35% of a borough, which was 6,000 something young people, aged 9 to 16. And what it then changed, not only from the voice of understanding, but then also empowering young people to be part of social change. So two of the examples of that, one was an estate that we're really passionate of seeing youth violence. And actually, when you really heard young people, it was a big part of it was food poverty, not the violence. And actually, when you really designed with them programs, you over the first year of COVID, they didn't see any violence, and yet other areas, and they were #1 hotspot as a borough before that point. We've just been launching stuff with the hospital. Young people have been redesigning how young people can really be supported in a hospital. And our local hospital now has youth workers on wards. They have youth workers in A&E. They have training for admin and security staff, not for the other staff, because they were the ones that were causing the most amount of pre-tension, unfortunately. And there's a whole load of other things that have gone in. And so, yeah, so for us, we genuinely believe social change, especially if you're an organization that often finds themselves sitting in the middle of things and trying to help things move forward. And if you're not careful, you're people pleasing and saying, yeah, I'll do a bit of that and I'll do a bit of this and we'll say yes to that. And actually nothing changes year on year. And what we're seeing by making sure youth voice and social change is part and parcel with young people, not just done to them, we have seen some significant changes in some quite major social problems, which, working with Young Manchester, we're looking at rolling out on a higher level with a lot more organisations, but that is Young Hat Foundation.
Thank you very much. Carl.
Hi everyone. So I'm the Operations and Relationships Manager of Number 5 Young People. Since 1971, the organisation has provided mental health support, counselling and outreach for 11 to 25-year-olds, and we cover the RG postcode area. So it's basically all of the area of Berkshire West. I'm a former service user, and that's often how young people begin to get engaged with us. We have a programme of young ambassadors, all of whom have either used our service or other mental health services, and they become young ambassadors because they want to, one, share their journey with other young people to help destigmatise and normalise getting help for your mental health, but also to really drive our social action and young voice work. For us, young voice and social action covers kind of everything we do. So we've got huge amounts of work that takes place on the service design and delivery level, which is young voice led, and things that seem really mundane and unimportant but actually completely transform a service. So in responding to what young people tell you about your service and making those changes might seem like tiny things, but they're huge. Working with partners to make young voice involvement in local authority decision making kind of business as usual rather than one-off nice to haves. Project service design, but also the publication of 2 reports during COVID that have had influence up to a national level. So really seeing how the voices of individual local young people who feel as though they aren't being represented in the conversation nationally, providing a space where they can tell their story and have that voice heard, can make a difference up to a national level, even when the scientific research-based people say things like, but you only spoke to 60 young people. And our response is, well, yes, but we didn't say we were doing a study of thousands. So just listen to the voice of those people that we've said we're going to engage with. And I think, it's been a real journey for us, kind of learning and having confidence that those things that seem tiny are social action and lead to huge, significant changes. That's us.
Thank you very much. And Daisy, would you like to give a little intro as well?
Hi everyone, so yeah, I'm Daisy. I'm the project manager for the Sovereign I Will Fund. So Sovereign, we're a housing association. We've got 60,000 affordable homes, so either social rent or affordable rent, across the south and southwest of England. And recently, excitingly, in February, we became an I Will Match funder. So I work in the community investment team, and we're delivering the project in our team to distribute grants to grassroots organisations who are working in our communities and with our young people living in our homes. I'm really interested, that's kind of the main thing we do. And through our I Will Fund project, we're working with our youth panel, who are a group of young people that that live in our homes, and they're helping to kind of make decisions on which projects we fund based on the areas that they're being funded in. So interested to kind of explore that a bit more, and more generally in our communities team, we work in a place-based approach like way where our community development officers kind of adapt how they work with residents and communities based on local needs. And so yeah, it's a topic that I'm really interested in. So yes, excited to explore it.
Okay, thanks, Daisy. Really appreciate that. I'm cautious that all our introductions have slightly touched on the first question, so but I'm just going to ask it anyway, and I know that probably like brief responses. But the first question that I have for you all today would be, what can be achieved by working in a place-based way? Do we want to go in the same order, or actually let's change it up a bit? Daisy, do you want to go first, then we'll go around?
Yeah, sure. I think so. We're really new to the kind of I Will Fund Match Funder panel. So we're kind of still learning, if I'm honest. I feel like everyone's kind of still learning. But from the kind of general work we do at Sovereign, we've seen so many benefits, like confidence, our kind of antisocial behaviour in our communities, which is often can be quite bad, is reduced when we kind of get young people involved in social action and involved in kind of making decisions in their local area, because they feel more included in their communities, they feel kind of better about themselves, they feel they have a sense of ownership. I was going to mention kind of in my previous role before I was a project manager, we ran a kind of participatory budgeting project where young residents would put forward ideas for improving their area, their local area, and then other residents would kind of vote on those ideas, and then those that had the most votes would secure funding. And then we would link up those residents then with kind of contractors and other local partners to then deliver those projects. And from that project, we saw so much cohesion between the communities and like confidence and just generally improved places to live. So yeah, I feel like there are so many benefits. I could probably go on for quite a while, but I'll let Carly and Dan have a go.
Thank you.
It sounds really cliche, but it's just from our point of view and from what we've seen, it's a way of working that's just better for everyone, because it directly impacts those individual young people that get involved, but also all of the young people whose lives are made better in some way as a result of whatever that piece of work is. At an organizational level, it makes the decisions we make much easier because they're informed by the people that we're here to support. But also as an organization, we've got confidence in the things that we do in the way of working, because we've got young people alongside us, their voices being amplified. So we're there as the facilitator of their voices, rather than that kind of tokenistic young people involvement that I think happens often still, where there's just that one-way dialogue of a bit of input from former service users or current service users, and nothing changes, or changes aren't communicated back, and it's all very one way. That kind of ongoing dialogue just makes things better for everyone. And I think at a kind of commissioning funding level, it also leads to more efficient money spend, because if you have services designed in a place-based way, then you can have confidence that those are the services that people in that place want and need and will engage with. And then you are spending money on those services rather than on services that arm's length professionals think are the right thing, because you can put kind of an unlimited amount of money into a service, but if it's not the service that those people will engage with, it's a waste of money, even if it's a good service. So working in a place-based way, you know, it's benefit from that individual right the way through to national commissioners and statutory bodies.
Thanks, Carly. Dan, would you like to?
Yeah, I think I've given some examples at the beginning, so I won't go over those. I think for us, I think there's two things I would say. One, as a funder, something that I used to run a charity that delivered a lot of work to young people, and someone once asked me, which of your projects, if you close them, or especially if a funder says we're not giving you funding, would the young people properly fight to keep open, and which ones would just go, oh, never mind, and move on, even though you're doing good work? It's not saying it's not a quality issue, it's just, would they fight? And I think what I've seen through the more we're doing this is communities fight when they're involved in it, and when they're not so involved in it, they just look for something else that can help them. And I think there's the answer to the same question of, does does place-based and social action work? Yeah, it does, because there's no way we can solve this. There is no one answer that's going to solve the social problems we have at the moment. But what I have seen, definitely major changes in improvements to areas, social problems, place-based models of working, is when they truly get their whole stakeholder community involved in delivery, not just a service or just again, I'm actually just against panels of young people going and just reviewing it, because I also think that's a slight waste of time, because very tokenistic. They need to be part of program design. They need to be part of what can work, what can't work. And I think then as a funder, you really see the difference at the end. When you see the reviews afterwards, you can really sometimes feel the difference of those that really have place-based and young people at the center of what they're doing, and those that are delivering to young people, but that there's a slight difference between those two models. I would say.
Thank you so much for the responses. Really insightful. I am liking the questions in the chat section. So if anyone else does have any questions, please feel free to chuck it in there, and then we'll try to address those at the end of the panel conversation. So the next question, I think is probably one of my favorite here. It's what's the difference between working in a place and taking a place-based approach? I think this question is quite important because of in any sector, should I say, there are buzzwords that just arise out of nowhere and seem like this new wave of things to grab attention. And really, I think sometimes they have an interesting impact on the work that has been done in the community, but sometimes it almost seems like it's just a buzzword. And so I really think this is a word, this is a question that could help, I guess, bring out what you guys think is really, really important and different about this. But yeah, I'll ask the question one more time. What's the difference between working in a place and taking a place-based approach? Dan, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a great question. I think it brings some insight into stuff that we're all journeying and trying to figure out. I think for Harrow, what we've seen, and again, we're a little bit of the problem in here. As funders, we've made everyone become outcome focused. So what they're doing is before they're doing anything, telling you what the answer is going to be in 3 years' time, and then having to implement that. And if they haven't got a relationship with the funder, no matter what's going on, they feel they've got to stick to this line of thought and this journey. And often when I see those models, they are about the place. They're about seeing a place or a problem and trying to solve something. And the absolute reverse of that is a place-based approach, which for me is about the journey, not just about the destination. Who's on the journey? How are they involved? How are they impacting change? How are they bringing more into the solution? Like, I love when I see, one or two organizations just starting to build, working together, because they know they can't do it together, and they're young people working together and all that kind of stuff changing. So for me, I'm sure the other two are going to give you much stronger answers, but for me as a funder looking back, I would say I really struggle sometimes when someone's very quick just to give me the solution of what's going to work within the next 3 years, and that the answer isn't in the journey of getting there, because that normally, and again, especially when you talk about the impact of social action and the real importance of kind of place-based approaches, that you really see a much better and massively more effective impact when the journey is part of place, not just being done to a place.
Thank you. That was a really well-rounded and succinct answer. I really appreciate it. Should go Carly, Daisy, then Rachel. Do you want to jump in on the question as well?
Yeah, I think building on what Dan said, actually, I think when I was looking at the questions for today, the first thing I wrote down was, well, anyone can work in a place, because you can decide to take an approach and implement it on a community in a place. But I think Dan's right, that speaks to the kind of end result. We will force you to get to this end result no matter what. But actually working in a place-based way is about being embedded in the place and having the people of that place make decisions because it's their place, and having ownership and being in charge. And for organisations to kind of hand over that power in a traditional sense to those people, but also for it being delivered by organisations that are embedded in a place, whether that's be that their staff have all engaged have that lived experience or live in the area or whatever's kind of relevant to that service. It's about embeddedness, but also handing over the power, and not thinking that because you've got the model that you think works or has worked in another area that you've got all the answers, and being, like Dan said, being willing for the path and the journey to change based on the needs and the experiences of the people that you're working with, because they're entirely place-based. Their experiences are as a result of the place they are in, whether that's what they're going through, where they live, the school they go to, whatever that place is, that informs their experience. If you're not willing to move and meet them where they are in that experience, you're just imposing a kind of tick box, bog standard model, and not meeting people where they are.
Thanks for the response, Daisy.
Thank you. I think Dan and Carly have kind of summed it up really well, but I think for me in community stuff, it's about kind of when I walk into a sovereign community, one of our estates, it's not about prescribing a solution to every single estate. So it's, you know, antisocial behaviour is often the problem, as I kind of mentioned, but it's not kind of prescribing the same solution to an estate in Bristol to an estate in Newbury or something like that. You know, it's about working in a more person-centred approach, so about kind of getting local people to come up with the ideas, adapting it to specific issues in those specific areas, and also for up there, so like, you know, in the community, it's not about focusing on necessarily what's wrong, it's kind of what's strong. So I'm building upon that. So yeah, I think kind of that was my thoughts around that.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, awesome. I love what you're just saying there, Daisy, around like taking that assets-based approach to working in place. And I think I think there's a risk sometimes in when sort of implanting a national program or a particular model into place, that maybe there is some of an assumption of, oh, this is what's missing or this is what isn't there. And I think it's always really important to take that step of taking stock of the strength and the richness that like already exists in that community and in that place, and also taking some time to do that, sort of the intelligence gathering around what's already happened in this community before. Like, has a similar project been implemented? I don't know, for example, we're doing some work around violence affecting young people, and you know, it's important to kind of think, right, so what work's already happened in this area, what networks already exist, is there a lot of strength in particular communities around this work already, before kind of going in as an organisation and delivering a programme. And again, and things like having youth panels to kind of assess services and things, as if that's coming from a sort of national perspective or a national government sort of body. Again, have these questions been asked before? The last time that you asked the questions, did you give feedback on what the outcome was? Like, how many times has this community been asked the same things over and over again? I think that there needs to be some intelligence gathering and some awareness of what's gone before, so that you can embed and build trust in a place as well. So yeah, I think it is really, really vital that national funders and national organisations, and that was really nice to hear from Daisy just then around sovereign housing, who works across quite a large area, but within each area that you work in, it's like, you know, it's really different. So I think it's really important for national funders to be able to work in place, but also have this awareness of like what a place-based approach means as well.
Can I just jump in really quickly? Sorry. It's just something that I've thought of as listening to Daisy and Rachel. I think the fundamental difference of working in a place is going to a community with the questions that you want to ask and asking them. Working in a place-based way is going to the community and asking them what questions we should be asking, because otherwise we're already imposing an external view by asking set questions. But if we're asking them what we need to be asking, then that's a true kind of place-based approach.
Okay, fantastic. I liked all those responses. So this next question, particularly for Dan and Carly, and Rachel, feel free to jump in as well. It is about what are the tensions between, the question is, what are the tensions between national and local organizations, and how can we bridge the gap? Yeah, do you want to start, Dan?
Love to. For me, it's a little bit of an easy answer. I have only ever seen, when you try and parachute in a solution to a local area, you create a bomb on any collaboration that's working well, because you create tensions for people suddenly getting defensive about their money. You get massive tensions of people getting really protective of their young people or their programs or their partnerships and networks. All these things happen. And that doesn't mean that nationals shouldn't be playing a part in local, but it does mean if they can't commit to that local for a period of time, then in Harrow, we're not really that interested, no matter what the offer is, because that dropping things in causes more damage than any long-term benefit for a very small amount of people. And again, we've seen some really good work where there's really embedded piece of work that they're really committed to working in a local level, really committed to seeing it as part of their model of long-term investment, especially as a funder. You know, we review it all the time. We do a lot of co-commissioning with the council, and I get really frustrated that every time, because they've got great funding and they can unfortunately hit scoring very well, so that obviously they'll keep getting those large grants for nationals. But what we see is at least a 6-month implementation phase, that's 6 months with no programs, and we see a 6 months at the end exit strategy. So that means a 3-year program turned into 2 years, and in those 2 years it went so quickly that actually if you spoke to local partners, they still weren't working, even if a big part of their evidence-based approach at the beginning was going to be partnerships. So for me, obviously I'm probably on the edge of the fence, saying that I really struggle sometimes that on paper a great, and again it's like Carly's kind of new thing, that maybe is the blueprint of test, that's their model, then it's possibly wrong. If their model is they've been asking questions and this is what's really coming out and this is how they program designed that piece of work, then I don't care what the size of the organization, because actually that's what I'm more interested in than a lovely, well-worded kind of application.
Thank you. I really appreciate that answer. Carly, would you like to jump on it?
Yeah, just building on what Dan said, I think a major tension is where power lies and also assumptions that are made. So I think that too easily it's viewed that the national organisations hold all the power, and therefore it's the assumption that they know best, they get it right, they know what they're doing, and the value of on the ground small local organisations or people or groups isn't valued. And yeah, like Dan said, if you helicopter in something that's then put and often is pulled quite quickly or short term, you don't have any of that deep community embedded trust and respect, but also engagement. And I don't think the solution is that difficult. I think two-way conversations is the beginning of how to solve some of this stuff. Often as small local organisations, we're asked up for information, pass up your information, but no one's having that conversation the other way. You, as a small local organisation, you give your information away in inverted commas to help inform decisions, but nothing's coming back the other way. But actually, if there was a kind of acknowledgement about those deep, long-term, trusting relationships that organisations on the ground have in communities, and can really access and hear from people who really need services that often aren't getting them because of the power structures that already exist, that's the way to kind of reduce some of that tension, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Rachel, would you like to also contribute?
Yeah, it was just kind of some of what Carly and Dan have been saying was just bringing into my mind some of the parallels between embedding youth voice, I think, and the sort of the tensions and the risks and the apprehension that people have around embedding youth voice. Sometimes in structures is about that giving away power and trust in the process, and not taking that outcomes focused approach of, right, this is what we know that we want to know, and this is what we know we want to have at the end of it. And yeah, it was just really bringing through a lot of parallels with kind of giving over power to young people and giving over power to place. It's that there's just a lot there that feels really similar, and you can understand, you know, it's a different way of working, and it feels a bit scary because you don't know what the end result is going to be. But yeah, that trust in the process feels like a really, really important thing to do.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Dan, did you want to add some stuff?
Yeah, just quickly say, and I think I agree with everything said, and there are simple ways to ask the right questions to understand whether that is part, because I don't think anyone's saying big is bad, small is good. That's not what everyone's saying. So for instance, one of the funding we give out is the HAF funding, all the activities and food funding. So one of the, because we see organizations jumping all over the area just trying to get that money. So one of the questions we now ask is, what partnerships do you have with schools, and what does that partnership look like? Because we're not interested in you just hiring a school, because actually you need to have those relationships so you can get free school meal students into your programs. And if otherwise we're paying a lot of money for things that we know is just not going to happen. So I think it is about the ecosystem locally. There's enough space for everyone as long as everyone's part of the same thing and not just trying to jump and follow money around the place, which often happens.
Thank you very much for that. I think that question was well answered in general, and clear ideas on how to bridge that gap. But with the place-based approach offerings quite strong involvement in the local community, I think there's a real opportunity for it to build great roots and pathways for young people. So place-based approaches support the progression routes for young people who are traditionally excluded from youth social action, young people who don't always self-select for these kind of opportunities. Let me know if those questions were clear, because there's some background noise. Oh, let's start with Carly.
Yeah, so I've got quite a few sort of live living examples of work that's going on here in Reading locally with partners as well. And I think the root of it is about what's maybe traditionally seen as social action being expanded and considering more than that typical involvement of social action. So one of our partners is Reading Football Club Community Trust. They work with a huge amount of young people, often young people who are NEET or in an alternative provision, and it starts with football coaching. But their progression route is that through getting involved with partnerships like us, where we go in and do a lot of young voice-based work, often their young people end up on youth work courses, gaining qualifications, and then delivering the programs that they were young people involved in. And that's come about because that's kind of reorientating the vision of what youth social action is, and who and how young people can get involved in it, because I think often it's seen as standing outside the council building protesting, and there's a role in that, but actually if it's really on the ground service level design, delivery, strategy work, that's something different, but that's social action too. And that getting involved in that and seeing the involvement that you've had being borne out and organizations making changes and new services being implemented, and then provide within those services offering those young people an opportunity to be involved in the delivery of them is a progression route. Here as an organisation, we are ops team with 3 lived experience young leaders, so 3 former service users, all use the counselling service and have come back in professional roles because we went through that process of having our voices heard. And I think that's the first bit, is that whatever that looks like, this has to reach those young people who haven't had their voices heard, so haven't accessed services or haven't felt able to access services, providing them having their voice heard and their stories validated, because otherwise you'll hear from those young people who have had those positive experiences already, and that's great and that's really important too, but we miss all of those young people who, if they don't have their voices heard, don't ever feel like they can get involved. So I think it's taking social action into the spaces that often aren't seen as social action spaces. So, you know, we're the core of our work, we're a counselling service. What are we doing? Walking all over the social action space. But actually, if you see counselling and mental health support as the beginning of having your voice heard and your story validated, of course, that's a space for young people who want to be able to engage in social action after that support.
I definitely agree with that. I think from that, I would also like to add an element of valuing these young people's voices. So in an element of, you know, young people getting remunerated for any services they provide to an organization and so on and so forth. But yeah, Daisy, would you like to go next, and then Dan?
Yeah, sure. I think something we've learned so far kind of through our I Will journey is about the projects that kind of have been kicked off the ground probably quicker are those where they've kind of asked young people what they want to get involved in, rather than sort of like telling them and had an interesting debate yesterday about kind of, you know, when you tell a young person to do something, they're much less likely to actually do it, rather than if they kind of, you know, come up with the idea themselves. With one of our grantees, who's working with kind of young people that are difficult to naturally access. But yeah, I think I just wanted to talk about yesterday as well. We visited another project, which I thought was a really nice kind of example of how, you know, how to get young people involved in place-based work, who have actually been traditionally, they've been excluded from kind of mainstream education. And it was in Southampton. We visited Solent Youth Action, who are one of our grantees, and they were donated a piece, like a patch of land from Eastleigh Borough Council in Eastleigh, and they basically have given complete control to young people of how to basically shape that space. And they've decided to kind of create this outdoor kitchen where they're going to cook food and the local community, and, you know, plant seeds and that sort of stuff. But that is, young people are given complete control of that space, which I think is amazing, to give that kind of power to young people. So yeah, I think it's kind of a bit of a challenging thing, engaging kind of young people that haven't previously been involved in it, but also so important, which is, yeah, hope that kind of gives a bit of an answer.
It definitely does. Dan?
So before I answer the question, there are three things that we've learned over the last 4 years, and one of them was only a couple of weeks ago. The first one is social action works best when young people involved have lived experience of the thing that they're trying to change. Like loads of young people want to voice her, loads of young people want to fight for change, but it really does make a difference if the people fighting understand it at a granular level, why things change, and they're really supported to make that change. So that's one thing we've learned that we really value and encourage. The second one is not all young people want to be leaders, and that's sometimes something we're all failed. We're looking for young people that can stand on the front line, go to meetings, be the voice, and actually we need to, when we're talking about social change, we need an army of young people that have different roles, and we're going to empower the roles, not say the people that lead are great and the people that aren't leading, maybe it's great that you're involved, but let's just in context, because I think social action sometimes are just looking for these groups of young people. And then the third one that we've only found recently, so we gave some grants out to, because of the I Will stuff that we're doing around Manchester, we wanted to test some theories as well recently. So we just did some pilot grants just to test some theories. And one of the ones that came back that we were really interested by was, when these three areas are balanced really well, it works. And that is when the organization value the individual, a young person, and make sure there's a plan for how they're doing well. When the young person values the group dynamic and they know what their part is to make that change. And the third one is when there's the equal balance that they're looking out at community and they're trying to see change on a wider scale. And the reason why those three that we were interested whether it would make a difference or not is when you only have one of them, things go a little bit skew-if. So for instance, if it's only community, you get people painting walls because they're not quite sure they're robust enough of what things they're trying to make a change in. When you make it just about the group, it's a lovely environment, but actually young people are often left out. You often get the people left in the corner that aren't really speaking, or the people that, because it's just about that group engaging together. And if it's not about the individual, you often find that the young people that make it to the end are the ones that were quite strong anyway. And actually, again, going back to that leader role, when you really value the individual's journey, then actually they can achieve greatness without it only being seen when they're not at the front of whatever you're doing. So those three things I would say we just found really interesting. We've just been doing some piloting and doing some thinking. But to the actual question you answered, and to my answer to that question is, I truly think when you get social action right and young people are given power, then it's less about you trying to create how they can achieve and more they will achieve. So for instance, one of our young people that we did stuff with 3 years ago is now the youngest MP in the borough. Now, we didn't set that up. We didn't go, that's an outcome we want to see. But the young person loved being involved in things and kept pushing themselves. We've seen the Westminster's got the youngest ever mayor. Oh, they were a youth league champion for Young Westminster. They were given real opportunities. Now, again, I'm only seeing them as the leaders, and I'm not trying to say, oh, that's the one we should think, because we're seeing things all over the place, seeing young people go to universities and being part of things like mental health subgroups and really seeing change in their university, because it's not about needing an organization to come and do it for them. Actually, they were given tools to be part of making positive change. So I would say if the young people are leaving and they're doing it naturally, then you've achieved. If the young people finish and then they just completely go off and do something completely different, then actually, yeah, maybe the actual achievement wasn't as strong as maybe it could have been. So that's my answer. It's very long-winded. Sorry about that, Hans.
No. It's very comprehensive, and I really liked it. Imogen put she loved the framing. I do as well. Just a quick follow-up question from Felicia. Tell me if I'm pronouncing any names wrong, please. But it is around what was the last one? Didn't quite understand. I think when you're listening out of three, Felicia, if you do want to unmute to re-ask that question, feel free to.
Yeah, it's Felicity or Flip. So there were pilot grants, 3 areas balanced, the young people, the individual values, the group dynamic, and what was the third one, Dan?
It was being community focused. How are you looking outside of your actual group so that it isn't just about in it? So for instance, what we saw sometimes with some social actions is the organization were very good at getting their organization to be better and better and better because of youth voice being at the forefront, but nothing was outside of the organization. It was always about internal. And actually success is much more effective when young people are looking outside and are given powers to look outside. You know, you start getting the young people doing their own things. So in some of these pilots where we've really encouraged this, one of them was saying, oh, the young people have started up a local food drop because they found there was on an estate nearby, there was one road that were really struggling. And by going out and doing some youth surveying, they found that the food bank nearby they had to go, but there were some people that couldn't get there. So they're just doing that because they see it's a good thing now to do. But it is for us thinking about, as we start to roll out bigger scales of this, how do you balance those 3 things together? And also the other one, again, if I didn't make clear, was the individual one. What we did see sometimes when organizations saw it was a benefit to do social action, but it was always about the group. It was never about the individual. We really saw when you went in and saw it, you saw the same things and same kind of projects always happening, where when they were really empowering each individual and giving them real, like, it costs a lot more. That's the only problem. Like, an organization then needs to have time to support a mentoring program to make sure a young person is doing okay, and that the package around that young person, including payment. So the way we've done that, just because there's someone asked a question, the way that we've been around in that kind of area is if young people are coming to meetings and being part of something, we don't kind of give payment to pay them. If the young person is being asked to be part of something where there's power, where there's responsibility, from grants panels to kind of presentations to pieces of research, then actually, like anyone, they should be being funded in some way to make sure that their time is valued, whether that's a voucher or whether that's payment. There's different discussions on that, but sorry, Felicity, again, I feel like I'm speaking a lot. You asked me a very little question and I went on for, I'm sure, about 20 minutes just now.
Thank you so much for that response, Dan. I do want to apologize to Felicity. I clearly just wasn't reading right. My brain wasn't processing as I was reading. Apologies for just saying the wrong name. There are other questions, but I'm very cautious of time. I think what we will do is myself, Rachel, and Emma will try to make a note and save the questions that I've been asked and try to get them across to our panelists and see if they can send any responses to you guys. Thank you so much for the questions. Thank you so much for the participation. We really appreciate everyone coming here today.